All donations are welcome. Go right now to the GoFundMe page for Nadine Scott McKenna or head to the KBLA 1580 website. On behalf of KBLA Talk 1580, thank you in advance for doing your part to honor a true songwriting legend.
And this Christmas will be a very special Christmas for me.
Merry Christmas.
Memories on corners with the foes and the moles. Walk to the store for the rolls, talking straightforward, y'all. Got uncles that smoking, some put blow up their nose to cope with their lows. The wind is cold and it blows. In they socks and they soles, told in they rolls. Corners leave souls opened and closed, hoping for more with nowhere to go. Rolling in droves, they shoot the wrong way cause they ain't knowing they goes. The streets ain't safe cause they ain't knowing the code. By the foes I was told either focus or fold. Got cousins with flows, hope they open some doors so we can cop clothes and roll in the rolls. Now I roll in
KBLA Talk 1580. Different kind of intro right there. I'm Dominique DiPrima, but this show is Areva Martin in real time. I'm filling in for Areva today. This is, you know, your one-stop destination for today's trending news, expert analysis, and Areva's unfiltered opinions. But today you'll be hearing mine, maybe Andy's, who knows? Possibly yours, 800-920-1580. You know me, I'm Dominique DiPrima. I do the morning show around here, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. weekdays, and I'm always taking calls. I love to chop it up, have some fellowship, argue, box. That's how we get stronger. That's how we get smarter. That is how we get better. And I am live, and I'm streaming on YouTube right now, KBLA 1580 on YouTube.com. And, of course, while you're at it, follow us, like us, hit us up on all the social medias, KBLA 1580. Also looking at your messages and your DMs in real time during the show, as the show is called. And you can find me at DiPrima Radio, DiPrima Radio. Following in Areva's footsteps, though, she likes to start you out with some headlines. Close to 20,000 people have been killed in Gaza since October 7th, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. That's a result of Israel's bombing campaign and ground invasion after Hamas terror attacks, the ongoing conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, so dating all the way back to 1948. The Israel Defense Forces' near relentless assault has displaced about 90% of the population there and leveled 40,000 buildings, according to UN estimates. And it's enabling what the organization calls an unfolding humanitarian disaster for Palestinian civilians who are searching for shelter, food, clean water, and medical care. Meanwhile, the UN is trying to pass a resolution to stop the fighting in the Gaza Strip. The Security Council will meet again to try to overcome U.S. objections to a resolution pressuring Israel to curtail violence and allow humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. On the other side of town, U.S. diplomats are trying to shut down plans for a meeting to discuss violations of the Geneva Conventions in the current war between Israel and Hamas. Huffington Post reports Palestinian diplomats and a significant group of UN member states, including some European nations allied with the United States, are preparing a call for Switzerland to launch a conference focused on the fighting on Israel and Palestine that would cover violations by all parties. The the United States trying to shut that down. The United States facing a surge at its southern border. Customs and Border Protection says it's logging up to 10,000 encounters with migrants on some days. On Monday, the CBP suspended cross-border rail traffic in the Texas cities of Eagle Pass and El Paso in response to migrants riding freight trains through Mexico. CBP officials say the influx is more than what their budget can support. Negotiations for funding and stricter rules for asylum seekers are now on hold because lawmakers have headed out for their holiday recess. Former New York mayor and Trump advisor Rudy Giuliani declaring bankruptcy after a judge said Giuliani has to pay $148 million. That penalty immediately. He owes it to two Georgia women he falsely accused of trying to help steal the 2020 election. The former New York mayor has reportedly said he doesn't have the money. Federal judge accused him of ongoing dishonesty and said he must pay right away. His response, well, he filed bankruptcy. In Ohio, Kansas, and Michigan, abortion rights advocates won major victories on the ballot over the past 2 years. Now, anti-abortion groups and lawmakers are turning their focus to blocking implementation of these initiatives by proposing bills and threatening lawsuits that would restrict the reproductive rights those elections were meant to protect. And finally, Harvard University, in the face of mounting questions over possible plagiarism in the scholarly work of its president, Claudine Gay, said Wednesday it had found 2 additional instances of insufficient citation in her work. The issues were found in her 1997 doctoral dissertation, which Harvard said had duplicative language without appropriate attribution. So far, the university sticking by Dr. Claudine Gay. In this hour, we'll be joined by we will be joined by a couple of contributors to Areva Martin's show. Dr. Calvin John Smiley will be joining us, and Marvin Pendarvis, South Carolina State Representative. And we'll take a look at some of these headlines. And in hour 2, we're going to go deep, dig behind the headlines, bring you the stories people are talking about, those stories that have an impact on the lives of everyday people. Today, we'll be talking about African Americans in the healthcare system, and we'll get into the legal aspects of Rudy Giuliani's, shall we say, bankruptcy filing and his legal troubles. What does that mean for the election ahead, as that bullying by Giuliani and others certainly put a chill on election workers across the country? Right now, though, it is my pleasure to welcome in our guests for today. Dr. Calvin John Smiley is the author of Purgatory Citizenship, Reentry, Race, and Abolition. Welcome, Dr. Calvin John Smiley.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me all right?
I do. Nice to meet you.
All right, perfect.
Dominique DiPrima
Nice to meet
filling
you as
in
well.
for Areva Martin. We certainly have a lot to touch on today. And South Carolina State Representative Marvin Pendarvis, welcome.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be on with you.
Yeah, it's great to have you on as well. And I know that both of you will be able to bring some light to some of these issues that we are looking at. Areva doesn't have it on her list, but certainly I am intrigued by the striking, the disqualification of Donald Trump from the ballot in Colorado, especially given that there are so many different states that have similar pending cases or cases that have been rejected that are coming back on appeal, where they're really looking to keep Donald Trump off of their ballots because of his participation in the attempted coup on the Capitol. Representative Pendarvis, do you think this is going to be a boon for Donald Trump in terms of giving him, campaign fodder and fundraising material, or do you think it could be a real problem if more states follow suit?
Well, here's what I'll say. First off, it's good to see the state of Colorado acknowledge that what happened on January 6th was an insurrection and a black eye on this country, and Donald Trump played a pivotal role in that, and really holding him accountable for that and then kicking him off the ballot because of his role in that. Obviously, the president, the former president, is going to look at every opportunity of an attack or an attempted attack as he sees it on him to try to use it as campaign fodder. So I would suspect he would look at it in that light, and certainly his campaign team will try to spin it in that direction. But you bring up a really good point, which is as more and more states start to look at this issue and start to really evaluate whether Donald Trump needs to be on the ballot because of his role in these attacks and the fact that there are criminal charges stemming from that fact, then it certainly could be a problem and certainly one to pay attention to as we head into 2024.
Yeah, I mean, we know for sure that Maine has already said they're going to hold off now because of the Colorado ruling. They're going to take more time and look at the evidence a little closer before making a decision. Your thoughts, Dr. Smiley?
Yeah, I agree with my colleague over here. One thing to remember is that Biden actually had won Colorado in 2020. So
Yeah.
I could also see Donald Trump again leaning into the spin of this is part of the agenda of the fake news and the stealing of the election to keep him off of the ballot. And so I think for the Democrats, it's not necessarily a win. It's or it shouldn't be seen as a win because there are other states that Donald Trump can focus on or try to gain some traction. So we have to be really, really careful about this. And the other thing, too, is that I think, as we already said, Donald Trump can use these types of things, again, as that fodder to dig into his campaign a little bit deeper. So, and I guess I'll say this. Maybe we'll see a lot of write-ins for Donald Trump in Colorado. I mean, we don't know how that will play out, but sure.
I mean, but I take it as a win because of the symbolism. And I know we can't, rest on our laurels or anything like that. I mean, California is considering ways to keep him off of our ballot. He doesn't need California. He never can win California. But I'm here for it just for the symbolism of it. I wonder if, anyone's going to be moved off of their position. If I already feel sorry for Trump, then I'm going to be like, oh, that the conspiracy is on. But do you think any new people, Marvin Pendarvis, will move over to the MAGA column because they feel that he's being unjustly persecuted by being kept off of these ballots?
I don't think so, and I don't want to sound naive in saying that, but I think you brought up a great point. Is people have kind of resided in their camps in a large way when it comes to how they view Donald Trump, and if they are supportive of his, then they're going to want to use this as an attempt to assassinate his character and to further prove why there's some kind of larger conspiracy. And then obviously those of us who look at what was done as a great injustice and a real insurrection and him as a threat to this democracy, then yes, this will be something that I think we support. As far as those moving into the MAGA column, because of that, I imagine you may have some people that look at it that way. I mean, there always are going to be those persuadables and those people who remain undecided. But at the end of the day, we have to remember what happened on January 6th. In looking at the testimony of those who survived and those who were part of that and witnessed that through the committee hearings that the House of Representatives put on, you have to look at that and say this is something that cannot happen. And knowing that Donald Trump played a pivotal role in that, I think those who look at that and really scrutinize the decision that the Colorado legislature made and many other legislatures may come to making in the future, then there's no other choice but to realize that they did it for the right reasons. And obviously we need to make sure that we don't reelect him and prevent him from being on the ballot at all costs.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth noting that, there are well over a dozen states that are currently considering keeping him off the ballot. As I said, Maine Secretary of State Shenna Bellows now was supposed to make a decision tomorrow about Trump's eligibility there and has now said that she will wait and hear more arguments from both sides given what's happened in Colorado. So this could be a momentum changer. We'll see what happens with it. Certainly, I love the acknowledgement of the fact that this is a thing, that if you try to overthrow the government, our Constitution says you don't get to go back in and be an officer. It's good that at least we're having the conversation. Continuing our conversation with Dr. Calvin Smiley and Marvin Pendarvis and you, when we come forward, want to look at a little bit at some of these developments happening in the Israel and Gaza. I don't even know what to call it. War, conflict, disaster. When we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
She's the real deal in real time. You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580. Environmental justice, pollution, and climate. In Los Angeles and across America, people of color are suffering and dying from disproportionate health impacts on a planet that has less than 10 years to prevent irreversible damage. Heat illnesses, respiratory illnesses, water-related illnesses, food system impacts, insect-related diseases, black maternal health, and mental health effects. As the impacts of climate change mount, millions of vulnerable people, our people, are going to bear the brunt of these extreme environmental events, which will likely lead to forced displacement, loss of cultural identity, and other related risks. These realities are as real as rain. Stay tuned to KBLA Talk 1580 for more details about the most progressive multimedia and live events campaign any black media outlet has ever undertaken to combat the climate catastrophe. Experts, events, empowerment. It's all on the way from unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580. We don't black down. We level up.
Level up, 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 level up.
Hey, you. Yeah, you. This is your dentist. Do me a favor and feel the front of your teeth. How grimy are they? Ugh. It's time for a Crest Pro Health reality checkup. That grime is the buildup of plaque bacteria that can cause cavities in just months. You need to switch to Crest Pro Health. While most toothpaste stop working in minutes, Crest Pro Health's antibacterial fluoride protects for up to 12 hours to stop cavities before they start. So pick some up on the way home. Smile. Crest has you covered.
With no fees or minimums and no overdraft fees, banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. Even easier than choosing to keep the Grinch away from the toy drive.
Who's going to deliver the toys to the kids?
What about me, the Grinch?
No.
Yep, even easier than that.
You steal the presents one time.
With no fees or minimums and no overdraft fees, is it even a decision? That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. Capital One NA member FDIC. Copyright Dr. Seuss Enterprises. Copyright Turner Entertainment Company.
Mom's early Alzheimer's diagnosis was hard to take.
And when I left the oven on, we decided together that it was time to see a doctor and make a plan.
Early detection gave us more time to seek out information and support as a family.
If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together. For more information, visit alz.org/time to talk. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
The way we spend our time defines who we are. You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
And the voice you're hearing is that of Dominique DiPrima, who is filling in for Areva Martin in real time. The situation in Gaza has just been a global nightmare. Of course, the nightmare is nothing like it is for those living there in that region, but it's become a global nightmare. And the impact is not just in the Middle East and not just on the global stage, but also here in the United States, the way it's playing out. A Security Council still has not been able to come up with a deal that would pause fighting again and get more aid into Gaza. I guess the sticking point seems to be who gets to inspect that aid and make sure nothing is going in that shouldn't go in. And it seems like the public opinion is really putting a lot of pressure here, not just on the Israeli government, but also on the United States. Now, I reported earlier how Palestinians and some of our allies in Europe are calling for a conference around the Geneva Conventions. The U.S. is quietly trying to quash that. Dr. Calvin Smiley, do you think that we're at a turning point here? Do you think we're at a turning point in terms of, global opinion and U.S. opinion? We saw the polling that came out earlier this week where there's a real divide in the White House, and younger voters are just not receiving well the way the Biden administration is handling this crisis. Do you think we're at a tipping point here? How do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's another indication of those in power not listening to those who are coming up. And this just falls in line with some other, national issues that we've seen in recent years, whether that's around drugs or reproductive justice. But to this point specifically, we hear folks talk about the never again motif, but yet we are watching an ethnic cleansing, a genocide unfold in front of us. And, the United States does have weight in the international community with Israel specifically to put a pause, put a ceasefire, to allow for folks to evacuate. But what we're hearing from the Israeli side is very clear that anyone who's in Gaza is a threat to them. And so we've seen universities in Gaza being killed. We've seen professors being killed. These are not people who are tied to Hamas. We've seen numerous amounts of children that I think, if this was the other way, it would be global devastation. But for many, they look at children in Gaza and Palestinian children as, just casualties of war. And my final thing here is that, the historians are not going to be seeing the United States as the good guys or Israel as the good guys in this.
Well, I mean, and it's shifting. I feel like social media and the way that we process information is shifting the sands in a way that the Biden administration is not responding to in real time. We've also seen it's close to 100 journalists now killed in Gaza, which is more than we've seen in any modern day conflict. That in itself, maybe it won't turn U.S. press against you right away, but I would think in every other country, and to some extent here as well, journalists are going to start giving you the side eye when your campaign includes the death of journalists.
Sure. And I think what we see too is that, the National Democratic Party is not that progressive or leftist, or however the conservatives tend to try to make it spin that,
Right.
Biden's a socialist or a communist. It's not. The kind of vanguard of the Democratic Party are pretty conservative. And I think this has been highlighted with this, with what's been happening. But we've also supported this before. I mean, there's just a magnifying glass right now. But it's not like before. It's not like October 6th was some type of utopia for Palestinians. I think I said it on this show before. Human Rights Watch said in 2022, it was the deadliest year for Palestinian children in the West Bank being killed by IDF and other settlers. So, this ongoing, whether we want to call it a conflict or what have you, is not new. It's obviously gained a lot more international attention because of what happened on October 7th. But this kind of alluding to that prior to that, it was just great particularly for Palestinians, is just complete erasure of what's been happening in that region for close to a century at this point, 75 years.
Marvin Pendarvis, I know this is tough for lawmakers to talk about it all, right? Because it's such a fraught issue, and I feel like I feel like we are starting to get more subtleties in the way that we're able to talk about it. That if you're against the killing of Palestinian civilians, it doesn't mean you're anti-Semitic automatically, or that you support Hamas. And that if you stand against anti-Semitism, it doesn't mean that you cannot be a supporter of a ceasefire. Are we getting to that point yet with elected officials? Because I know it's even more fraught for you, those of you who have your job.
I think you bring up a good point, and do I believe that we're there yet? No. I've had conversations with colleagues in my own legislature and colleagues across the country about this issue. In fact, I've attended several conferences recently where this issue was discussed, and I think you're right. I think the way you frame it, do you support a ceasefire, or are you, supportive of us occupying Israel and Gaza and seeing what happens? What I'll tell you is this, what we've seen from this administration certainly is a shift in how they view this issue. You've seen the Biden administration really respond to the public outcry as far as how violent it has gotten over there. You saw Vice President Harris talk about this being an international crisis, and that we have to protect humanitarian law internationally, and in pushing for the idea that we need to really support a two-state solution and a long-term solution for what we need to see work over in Palestine. And so I would say yes. Over time, I think that you will start to see elected officials really frame the issue in a way where we're not making them mutually exclusive, and that you can be supportive of a ceasefire and recognizing the nuances of how violent it's gotten over there, and certainly supporting Israel. And that's something that my colleagues and I have certainly talked about in one really trying to really inform ourselves on as we look forward to 24.
We've got news, traffic, and sports, and continuing the conversation exclusively on KBLA Talk 1580.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we celebrate Christmas, we celebrate you. Thank you for turning us on this year. Happy holidays.
Wow! Mommy's kissing Santa Claus!
I'm Amber Payton. Here's the latest on the Black Information Network. The NAACP is asking questions about an exercise at a Florida daycare. Parents of a black child at Building Brains Academy in St. Cloud contacted the NAACP after seeing pictures this month of their 2-year-old daughter portraying Rosa Parks. The girl's dad says one photo showed her with her hands behind her back next to a white student dressed as a police officer. The child no longer attends the daycare. The daycare says it deeply and sincerely regrets the incident. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu issued a formal apology from the city to the 2 black men wrongly accused of killing Carol Stewart over 30 years ago. The pregnant woman was actually killed by her husband, and he told police that a black man shot her in 1989. Alan Swanson and Willie Bennett were both identified publicly as suspects in the weeks after the killing, and Wu says what they faced was unfair and racist. She says an apology is long overdue and is sorry for the pain they have carried all these years. That's the latest. I'm Amber Payton on your home for 24/7 News, the Black Information Network.
Over in SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, the Rams and New Orleans Saints are kicking off at 5:15, so you can start expecting some heavy traffic flow in the area. In Pasadena, right lane is currently blocked with an accident on the 210 West after Rosemead Boulevard. Watch for stop traffic coming from Huntington Drive up to 20 minutes. West LA continues to have holiday travels up to 55 minutes on the 405 South, running stopped now between Wilshire Boulevard and La Tierra. In Pico Rivera on the 605 South before Washington Boulevard, watch for heavy traffic flow from the Pomona Freeway.
For victims of drunk and drug driving, our grief is unique. But you are not alone. You always have a place at MAD. Call our 24-hour victim helpline at 877-MAD-HELP or visit mad.org.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Big props to a couple of Detroit Pistons players, Marvin Bagley and Alec Burks. The Pistons have lost 24 straight games, but Bagley and Burks put aside their misery long enough to spread some holiday cheer. Bagley and Burks agreed to pay off the debts for 18 families in Detroit that were attending a bowling event. The generosity totaled more than $80,000. Nice gesture by Bagley and Burks during the holiday season. Top 5 scorers this week in the NBA: Philadelphia's Joel Embiid, Luka Doncic of Dallas, Kevin Durant of Phoenix, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander of Oklahoma City, and Giannis Antetokounmpo of Milwaukee. Mickey Joseph is the new head football coach at Grambling State University. Joseph joins the legendary HBCU program after serving as an interim head coach at Nebraska in 2022. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
It's the gift-giving season, and we have a gift for you. Visit us online at kbla.store for holiday savings of 20% off all of our KBLA swag. For the best in merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to kbla.store right now. And be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at kbla.store today. That's kbla.store for all our official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580, at 20% off, but only during the holiday season. Happy holidays.
Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas!
KBLA Talk 1580 is the exclusive media sponsor of This Light of Ours, activist photographers of the Civil Rights Movement. A dynamic new exhibition on view now at the Skirball Cultural Center in Los Angeles. This Light of Ours showcases more than 150 photos taken by movement insiders from diverse backgrounds that reveal the vital work undertaken by a broad coalition of organizers and everyday people whose collective action changed America. This Light of Ours is one of 3 temporary exhibitions currently on view at the Skirball, which together explore issues related to civil rights, immigration, and pluralism. Tickets and more information for all 3 exhibitions are available at skirball.org. That's skirball.org. SKIRBALL.org.
Did you know addiction to drugs like meth or cocaine is a disease and not a choice? But getting help is. If you have stimulant use disorder, you, your family, and friends may have a lot of questions, including where to start. Choose Change California can help. Make a change today and find a proven treatment option for you at choosechangeca.org.
My mom has decided to learn to paint, and she's good.
My dad's now into creative cuisine, and I've already put on 6 pounds.
Learning new things comes with age.
My mom, she started forgetting my name and what we're talking about.
Forgetting well-known things doesn't. Memory loss may be a sign of Alzheimer's disease. Early detection gives you and your loved one time to plan for the future. Learn the warning signs of Alzheimer's at 10signs.org. Brought to you by the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Turning my pain into purpose is pretty much what I have done to start this foundation.
In August 2020, after the death of George Floyd, Bridget Floyd and other family members established the George Floyd Memorial Foundation in support of the Black community.
It's going to take more than just us as a foundation. It's going to take the community, the world, to make a change.
Fight for racial justice for the Black community. Learn how at lovehasnolabels.com. Brought to you by Love Has No Labels and the Ad Council.
There's no time like the present. Let's get back to more of Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
And I'm Dominique DiPrima in for Areva Martin. It's my honor to sit in her chair today, but you can find me on this same radio station 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. weekdays. That's Pacific time. You know, we're talking a little bit about what's going on in Gaza. There is a big march happening here in Los Angeles on Saturday. It's Black Lives Matter and a number of other community-based groups, Latino groups, Black, African-American groups, and Palestinian groups will be marching for a ceasefire that is going to be at La Cienega Park. It's right there at La Cienega and Wilshire. Starts at 3 p.m. And they will march to an undetermined location. So I guess you better get there at 3 if you're interested and just join the crowd. There's been conversation, and there was a cover story in the LA Times, but there's been a lot of talk online as well about how this situation in the Middle East is fracturing to some extent some traditional alliances within, Black legislators have kind of taken sides. There's a big push to raise money to oust certain Black lawmakers like Cori Bush, like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, who's not Black but she's Palestinian, because of the stances they've taken on this. And African Americans in the main have sided with Palestine here. Not everybody, but in the main. And it's creating challenges, I guess, for some of our traditional alliances with progressive Jewish folks. But I don't think that I don't know. This is more your area of expertise, Dr. Smiley. But to me, that doesn't mean that Black people are suddenly anti-Semitic.
No, absolutely. I'm sorry. Yeah, absolutely not. This is, as we said, or as I think you said before we went to break, this is not a zero-sum game, right? One could be upset about what happened to people at a festival on October 7th and simultaneously recognize that the state of Israel is practicing apartheid and keeping food, electricity, gasoline, and basic human rights violations, right? We can walk and chew gum as human beings, and we can recognize that violence can be both interpersonal, structural, and institutional. To your point about black lawmakers, there's never been a monolith of black lawmakers. We like to think like that, and not you, but America likes to think like that, as like, you know, we often try to sanitize the civil rights movement as if everyone just listened and followed Dr. King to a T. Nick was very critical of Dr. King in some of his positions, especially if we look at the Albany movement in Albany, Georgia. Malcolm X and more black nationalist organizations were critical. So there's never been this black political monolith. To that end, folks like Cori Bush, Rashida Tlaib, and others have constantly been a thorn in the side of the standard or conservative Democratic Party. This is not like they were in the fold and the Democrats were behind them. The Democrats have been trying to get rid of them since they've been elected. If we look back to 2020, there was a whole pushback for when Cori Bush said defund the police, and there was this whole backlash against her for criticizing, for standing with this term defund. So I think what the Democratic Party needs to do is realize that black people are not here to do their bidding, but we are, you know, multi-talented and, you know, multiversed, and we have these different ideas. And the last thing I'll say is that, yes, we see that a lot of young folks, black folks, have, as you said, sided with Palestine. But I think there's a shared solidarity because of the shared history of land dispossession, settler colonialism. And let's not forget, when it was 2014, 2015, and Black Lives Matter and other protesters were in places like Ferguson, Missouri, and being shot in the face with tear gas canisters, it was Palestinian activists who were tweeting out how to clean your eyes from when you get tear gas in them. So there has already been a shared and mutual solidarity between Palestinian activists, black activists, and very much Jewish activists, right? The Jewish Voices for Peace is not on the side of Israel here, and they are a large organization of collective of Jewish Americans and Jewish folks internationally who are calling for a ceasefire.
Yeah. Speaking of challenges to the Democratic Party, Representative Pendarvis, you know, the border, what's happening at the border now, the border is always a crisis, right? It's a constant crisis. It's a constant, I feel like, a kicking the can down the road by both Republicans and Democrats in terms of coming up with some kind of comprehensive, functional immigration policy. But right now we're seeing a huge surge at the border. It's a challenge for the Biden administration, ahead of an election year when the president's numbers are down. And we're seeing the former president really leaning in again, sort of raising from the dead his colorful, fascist, anti-immigrant, dog whistle rhetoric. Which he's even expanded it now to include, Africans. Usually used to just be Latinos that he was disparaging, saying they're poisoning the blood of the country. What's the sweet spot for Democrats here? I mean, what should the Biden administration be doing? What should Democrats be doing? Because you find yourself in a position where the Democrats are saying, they're negotiating in Congress. What do we do about this? Do we tighten up rules for refugees? And the Democrats find themselves arguing positions which, may or may not be helpful for 2024.
Well, like what's going on in Palestine, we can't ignore public opinion here. And what we see, and we have to acknowledge as Democrats, acknowledging that there is a rise in illegal crossings at the border. Acknowledging that, but recognizing, and this administration has done a good job of really pointing the issue to what are the root causes of illegal immigration, and what can we do to reduce it. Things such as poverty, crime, corruption, and addressing those head on. If you hear President Biden and Vice President Harris talk about what's happening at the border, they certainly acknowledge what's happening, but it's about trying to make sure that we're doing everything we can as a country to provide relief that addresses the root cause of this, and making sure that if we can get to the root cause, then we'll see a vast reduction in what's happening at the border.
I mean,
I think that's what has to happen.
Go ahead, Representative.
No, I think that's what has to happen, and certainly messaging to that point is what's going to be key for Democrats going into 2024.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to get a little bit more specific and less vague. I mean, it seems clear to me, at the risk of coming up missing myself, that what's happening now is these cartels are in the people smuggling business instead of drug smuggling business. And it seems like we're going to have to go upstream and confront that instead of attacking like individual people trying to get in. Is dealing with this pipeline. It's the same drug pipeline it's the same cartels that people are fleeing, that are profiting off bringing them here. How do you stop that?
I agree. I think we have to meet the issues head on and meet it where it's at. And we can't be afraid to meet these issues and to really call them out for what they are. One of the biggest challenges, and I think many Democrats would agree, that one of the many challenges of the party is the messaging issue, right?
Yep.
One of the that we have not done a good job of is messaging to the American people about what it is that we're attempting to do and how it's going to benefit the American people. And I think when it comes to the border, and especially knowing that Donald Trump is going to use that issue as he continues to campaign, that what is it that we're attempting to do at the border? How is it going to protect the American people? But also, how can we make sure that we address those root causes and really being specific about what's happening and meeting it head on? So I completely agree with you, and I think that's what has to happen as we move into 24.
And hopefully, I mean, we are going to get it together with this messaging. I think it's messaging, and sometimes it's also policy, right? I appreciating what you said about the Biden administration shifting on, for example, on Gaza, shifting a little bit on the way they're addressing the border. But I still feel like those shifts are slow. And many times the messaging and even some of the policies are 20th century policies in a 21st century scenario. And somehow we're going to have to catch up. It's not just, Biden is older. I mean, Trump is older too, but he somehow knows how to message, he knows how to message the moment. And when we come forward, Dr. Smiley, I'd love to get your thoughts on the sort of conflation here between this rising white supremacist, really fascist rhetoric coming out of the former president's mouth, and the division and the dog sirens, they're not really dog whistles, around this surge at the border. That's next on KBLA Talk 1580.
Areva time is the right time. More of Areva Martin in real time when we come forward. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, Maisha Cairo here, KBLA, live at Chase Bank on Crenshaw and Vernon for the In This Together tour with female business owners, a day of empowerment, community panels, and best of all, tips on building business from marketing to capital. I was able to speak with one of the panelists, the owner of Kids Love. Take a listen.
So Kids Love, KIDSLUV, is a first-to-market zero-sugar, vitamin-enhanced functional beverage for kids.
So the zero sugar is really important because if not, the sugar gets on the teeth, it can cause cavities. So as a mom, I love this vitamins and hydration in one. Tell us what's happening here with Chase Bank today.
So I would say, I think what Chase is trying to do is create a community actually for entrepreneurs, a place where people can go. They have the space to do it. It's a beautiful space. And to be able to have these conversations. There are so many benefits to being a women-owned and certified business, from a standpoint of getting into stores, not paying the slotting fees of what it takes to be in stores. So I think Chase is trying to bring awareness to a lot of the things that people just don't know about, that not only the bank can help, but outside of the bank, their relationships can help create.
That's beautiful. And I know, this is how we build equity in communities of color, is kind of spreading that information and that knowledge. So thank you for being here today and doing your part and letting these women know that it is possible.
For KBLA 1580, I'm Maisha Cairo in the community with Chase.
Hey, you. The one on the couch who just told your friend you can't go out because you're busy? Ready to get real about your psoriasis? When your current treatments don't do enough to help control the inflammation beneath the skin, causing plaques and pain, stressing and scratching, it's time to stop hiding and get real with your dermatologist so they can help you get clear. Get real clear about psoriasis at letsgetrealclear.com. Sponsored by AbbVie.
Hi, this is Scott Trout of Cordell & Cordell. If you're a dad who is facing divorce, there are extra layers of stress that may include stereotypes and assumptions. No two situations are the same. Our legal experience and dedication prepare us for whatever legal challenges we face together. You need a partner you can count on. For more than 30 years, Cordell & Cordell has represented men in divorce.
1455 Frazee Road, Suite 1050, San Diego, California, 92108. Online at CordellCordell.com.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
Representative Marvin Pendarvis and Professor Calvin John Smiley are with me this hour. And Professor, I got to ask you about this, overlap here. You see the racist rhetoric, really white supremacist, some would say fascist, words coming out of the mouth of the former president. Clearly, that's the ship he's sailing on in 2024. And the surge at the border exacerbates that. I think it does. I've seen now even some of the drift of, even though I think it's over-exaggerated, the drift of some black Americans towards the Trump camp is partly based on the sort of xenophobia and this idea that immigrants are taking our jobs in a time when everything is expensive and people are feeling, housing insecurity, food insecurity, and all of that. How do we navigate this moment as progressives or Democrats in addressing the real concerns of economic concerns of constituents without falling into this trap of this sort of white supremacist rhetoric?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it's as old as America itself, that there's this push towards not liking the other or who is seen as the outsider. And we see that has played out with most, if not all, immigrants of all shades and hues. And then obviously when we start to look at race, religion, other ethnic and cultural identifiers, that intensity and duration changes. But, I think it's part of the language that clearly conservatives and I'll say fascists use, but also even with Democrats and more moderates use, right? Even saying things like the surge or crisis still has a certain level of anxiety and paranoia that's brought to it.
Yeah.
And so I think we also have. So I think to our colleague's point earlier, we have to look at some of the deeper structural issues on why people are making these border crossings. And it's not because they love America necessarily. It's because what is happening maybe in their homeland, the destabilizing of their homeland, which could be caused by America and other American corporation interests, sure, but poverty and other reasons, because these treks are not easy, right? This is not like going to Disney World and you're getting a nice tour of the American South west as you're climbing over these borders. There's rugged terrain, the weather, you have the coyotes, you have other border patrol and things like that. My argument is, or not my necessarily argument, but a position I take is that I think we really have to think critically about what borders are and how we might want to start to think about dismantling borders. and I mean that quite seriously. Borders create boundaries. Boundaries create difference. Difference creates a certain level of anxiety, and that anxiety gives way to these various kind of stereotypes or other dissensions amongst the ranks of how we see other people, especially people who are maybe in similar boats as Black folks in America, right? Who are struggling and trying to make it.
I mean, I never play devil's advocates. I'll play people's advocate.
Sure.
People say, because they've said this to me, I always say, why corporations don't have to respect borders, but humans do. But at the same time, every other country has borders.
Sure, but that's not necessarily that doesn't always mean that they're right, in the sense that we don't need to have these kind of very strict borders that then keep people out, especially when the motto of the United States is "Give us your tired, you're hungry, you're poor." Right? It doesn't really fall into line with what that means, unless we only mean that for "Give us your tired, you're poor, you're hungry." And they have white skin and from Western Europe.
I mean, in reality, that's what it is, because Trump's dad is an immigrant. He's married to an immigrant. He married two, right? Ivana and then Melania. So
Melania, sure.
Yeah. So
sure.
I mean,
right.
They're white immigrants, so I guess they don't count as immigrants.
Right, and I think that also goes into like a deeper reason why we used to even have conversations about borders. And if we're going to start talking about cartels and the drug trade and other kind of trafficking, yes, human trafficking is a huge, huge issue that needs to be addressed. But, if we're talking about drug trafficking and things like that, we also have to then think about, well, do we make more drugs legal? And do we take, kind of pull the rug from underneath them? And, I think a lot of people start to clutch their pearls when they hear that. But, we have plenty of drugs that are legal, alcohol, tobacco being the top two, right, that kill a lot of people, yet we don't bat an eye for that. So, I think we have to just start to have deeper and broader conversations around what borders are and how we open them, not necessarily close them. In a safe way.
Representative Pendarvis, you are also an attorney, and I know you. I don't know if what Dr. Smiley is saying is making your hair stand on end as a lawmaker or as an attorney. But how do you view it? How should we be addressing this in terms of a social issue in the push that it seems to be giving our democracy towards a more authoritarian future?
Well, I really appreciate the professor's point about borders, and I want to speak to that, because when you think about immigration and you think about the root causes and why people want to come over and migrate to the United States, a lot of it is escaping the conditions that exist in their country. A lot of it is seeking refuge here. A lot of it is opportunity. There's a myriad of issues. But what I think it also can be cause us to look inward as a country and kind of seeing the policies that we put forth. As a lawmaker, I look at it as immigration as a real anti-poverty program, if you will, right? And finding out what can be done from a national level to ensure that Americans have what we need, and I think that's something that has to be done on an international level. And really, I look at barriers, literal borders in our countries, and also the metaphorical borders that really divide us as people, that divide us as cultures, and something that needs to be talked about more. And that's something that we've pushed here in South Carolina, just really looking at really broadening, our viewpoints on what it means to be in this country and to welcome people here and to have programs that are going to make sure that life here and the things that we want people to achieve here are accessible, that are affordable, that are attainable, and that are within reach. And that's so much of what we see at the border, and that's so much of what we need to be doing to make it a reality here in this country.
Representative Pendarvis, how do we track you? Are you on X and Instagram and stuff like that?
Yes, I am. I'm on X as Rep_Pendarvis, and Pendarvis is PENDARVIS. and Instagram, attorney_pen, P-E-N.
And Professor Dr. Smiley, how do we keep track of your works and your movements?
Sure. So on Twitter/X, I'm at Uptown Castro, Castro with a K, and my website is www.cjsmiley.com.
Well, we have just about a minute here, and there's about 1 million more questions I could ask you. But while we were talking about this, I'm going to just ask you for your quick take here. I think a lot of black folks are being pitted against immigrants right now, and we're not thinking about this idea that birthright citizenship could be the next thing these folks go after. Representative Pendarvis, you want to just take a quick take on that?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what people are going to go after. I think we're getting to a point where, there's this idea that if you're not born here in the United States, then there's certain rights and opportunities that should not be afforded to you. We saw that come up with the election of Barack Obama, right? And the big deal that was made of his birth certificate. And so I sense it coming, especially as we continue to talk about the border, and there's an increased focus on immigrants coming into the country, that being something that plays out on the national scale, in the national conversation soon.
Representative Pendarvis and Dr. Smiley, thank you so much for being with me this hour. Appreciate you.
It was a pleasure.
We've got a lot more straight ahead. It is Areva Martin Show, but Dominique DiPrima's in the chair on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Amber Payton. Here's the latest on the Black Information Network. A new California law that goes into effect on the first of the year requires law enforcement officers to provide a reason for a traffic stop before questioning the driver. Assemblymember Chris Holden said the measure was needed to reduce what he called pretextual stops. That's when a police officer pulls over a vehicle for a minor infraction in order to investigate a possible larger crime. Pretextual stops have been deemed constitutional, but according to a study out of Stanford University, black drivers are more than 1.5 times more likely to be searched than white drivers. President Biden's visit to Milwaukee drew hundreds of protesters calling for a ceasefire in the Middle East. A group of pro-Palestinian protesters chanted for the president to end the war. Milwaukee police and the Secret Service confined the protest to a block away from where President Biden was addressing the Wisconsin Black Chamber of Commerce. That's the latest. I'm Amber Payton on your home for 24/7 News, the Black Information Network.